Welcome everyone to the Space Prize Speaker Series, episode 15. It is August 24th. We are here with our guest host, Rebecca Schembri, and our guest speaker of the week, Ashley Furst from iRoc Space Radio. So very excited to dive in with these women and with our participants. We've got students, educators, and enthusiasts from around the world. Another very international showing today with a small group of live participants. I'm Mark Wagner. I'm the president of the Space Prize Foundation, which I'll say more about in just a couple of minutes. As I mentioned, today's guest host is Rebecca Schembri. Those of you who participate or watch have certainly seen that Rebecca is a regular participant. She is also a recent graduate of Harvard University in with a focus on space law, and she'll be leading most of the interview today. I will hand off to her in just a couple of minutes. Our guest, of course, is Ashley Furst from iRoc Space Radio. She also, turns out Rebecca and Ashley are both Harvard alumni, which is really kind of a fun connection to make. And she will get a proper introduction from Rebecca in just a few minutes. To kick things off, though, I do want to introduce anybody who's watching us for the first time to the Space Prize Foundation, which you can find at spaceprize.org. We are focused on helping students, particularly young women, to pursue STEAM education and explore careers in the growing space industry, or we might say the growing space economy, because it's impacting many more industries now than it has in the past. We do this in two ways. We do this by running attention-grabbing and thus inspiring contests with spectacular prizes like, say, zero-G flights, and through providing open education resources like this interview series and like the curriculum that we're working on. So our first Space Prize Challenge was in New York City. We launched a essay contest in January, followed by a video contest in February, and by March we had 25 finalists from around the city, representing all 5 boroughs, on a simulated mission to Mars at the Challenger Center. We spent 5 winners to Space Camp's new leadership program called Space Camp Lift in April. We had a Yuri's Night celebration for them, and in May we also sent 5 winners up on a parabolic flight on zero-G. They got to fly with Star Trek's Denise Crosby and with our executive director, Kim Macharia, and it was a great culminating activity for the 5 winners from New York. They also each get a year of mentorship from an influential woman in the space industry. So this is only now a couple of months into that process for them. We are currently running a similar challenge in Paris. The winner will be announced at IAC in about a month. And we have just launched a challenge in Portugal. It's a countrywide challenge for the first time, and we'll really be kicking off after IAC. In the meantime, we will be launching our ambitious space education curriculum in just a couple weeks at the end of August. There are 8 chapters. You can see at least an overview on this slide. It's not just an intro to space science and the history of space exploration. It's also why space matters to people here on Earth. What's happening in the growing space economy, and sort of forward-looking philosophical issues like ethics and governance, space law, for instance, and sustainability. So I invite you guys all to come back and check that out in just a couple weeks' time. I also need to mention, of course, that my book on space education is out. It's sort of a companion for educators and enthusiasts. Not so much a student audience, although enthusiastic students might get something out of it as well. But this looks at how we might best prepare students for this growing space economy, for humanity's multi-planet future, which is rapidly approaching. And it looks a few steps beyond to how might we educate students once we get there to the moon and Mars and elsewhere in the solar system. Now, this speaker series is our other effort at an open education resource. We're 15 episodes in. We're booked out for over 50, well over a year now. Really, really excited about it. We're talking to astronauts, engineers, and scientists, but we're also talking to entrepreneurs, designers, lawyers, historians, broadcasters. So it's really an opportunity for kids to see a variety of career trajectories into the growing space industry or space economy. So for those of you that are here, please feel free to participate in the chat as much as you like. We definitely love that and encourage that. Feel free to raise your hand physically or using the raise hand feature. If you've got a question or want to interject, or as I find myself saying every week, it's a small enough group, feel free to just interject. If you need help, you can message me or use the help feature, or just type in the chat and we'll help you out there. The other thing I'd like to say is that we'll often leave wait time if we are waiting to see if our guest has more to say, or if one of you who's here live has more to say or more to ask. It is a remote interaction, so we do like to leave time for that. It's good, but as from an educator perspective, too, wait time is good. You never know what people are going to say if you leave a few extra moments. So, any questions about any of that before we kick off? I think most of the people who are here live with us are veterans. So. Awesome. All right, I am going to briefly introduce our guest host, Rebecca Schembri. Personally, I know Rebecca because I see her almost every Wednesday morning on the Overview Roundtable with Frank Wright and a very diverse crew from all across the globe. And it's really fantastic to have her perspective in there. She also writes many of the blog posts that I wind up posting on the Human Space Program blog. So I'm very grateful for her contributions there. And she has recently graduated at Harvard University, as I mentioned, with a focus on space law, which means we should probably have her back to do an episode as well. So looking forward to that. She's a social scientist, a space diplomat. She hails from Reno, Nevada, and she's a communication director for two organizations that are important to me, the Human Space Program, as I mentioned, and also Astronomy for Equity, which among other things is giving telescopes to students and running astronomy camps for students across Africa. So very, very cool stuff. By the way, Rebecca, you might want to talk to Nanofo about that and see if there's any opportunities for synergy there, right? She, in addition to her work at Harvard, she's a science communicator and believes in space advocacy. Otherwise, you'll find her riding her bike, visiting family, watching sci-fi, and as I understand it, enjoying the dark skies outside of Reno nowadays. So very, very cool. I'm thrilled to hand it over to Rebecca, who will be introducing Ashley and taking it from there.
Thank you, Mark. I don't have Ashley's bio here, so I have the interview. I can get started on that if you want.
Let's do it. All right. I'm going to stop sharing my screen then, and it is over to you guys.
Okay, so you all will find out how amazing Ashley is as we get through this interview. Ashley, hello. Welcome to Space Prize. Please tell us about your work at iRoc Space Radio.
All right. Hello, Rebecca, and everyone listening to us or watching us across the world. My name is Ashley Furst, and I have two programs on iRoc Space Radio, which is iHeart Space Radio's #1 station for space music, news, and entertainment. The two shows I host, I actually wrote, I anchor, and I produce them as well, are the Space News. I say my name is Ashley Furst, giving you a first look at space news. And then the second show is Top 10 Questions with the top guns in our space industry, where we interview today's movers and shakers, launching us into tomorrow's new horizons. So they're two totally different ones. The Space News is under 4 minutes. I give you all the major space headlines with some rock and roll music. I think this week features some Nicki Minaj and Lil Wayne in it. Sometimes I'll feature Pitbull, because when you're talking about nitrous tetroxide or the hydrazine and just technical parts of the rocket and space news, it's fun to drop in a song just to like wake up the audience. And something else I like to do is I say it's a Wall Street Journal meets Saturday Night Live weekend update, because I'll give you the facts, the headline, but then I'll make a punchline. You know, for instance, when I believe Axiom Space flew up some private space tourists for only $55 million per seat. For that much money, I hope it reclines. So I try and make the space news fun. And that's a whirlwind 7 times a day. And then the interview show just features one Top Gun per month. I've had the amazing opportunity to interview directors of NASA, astronauts, Dr. Sian Proctor, who was in the Inspiration 4 mission. I know you guys had Chris Zembrowski on. And even launch code writers and mission managers. So that's a totally separate show that has a different pace to it, more of an NPR feel.
That is so inspiring, Ashley. And how did you get into this career?
Okay, well, this is a lesson on always do your best, because you never know who's watching. I was actually poached and kind of cherry picked from someone who works in the record label business. A record label executive remembered that I had a gold record with Sony for my, Christmas album with, Beyonce, Christina Aguilera, and other like Christmas household names. And so he also remembered that I was Ivy League educated and that I was in the PR business. So I was always scripting press releases. I even had a band in New York City that toured. So I had a whole lot of stage experience, live in front of the microphone experience, just being an MC of events. And so he said, hey, that girl with the alto voice and all the, stage microphone experience who, writes amazingly, Ivy League educated, do you think she could audition for this new space news show we're going to do? And so I was asked to audition, and I didn't have a script in front of me. I literally just held up my little cell phone as a recorder, and I would Google space headlines and I would say them. And then because, space news had never been done before, Rebecca, I actually thought, well, what do we do on Earth? Okay, on Earth, the news starts with weather and traffic. So obviously I need to start with the Mars weather and traffic. So I just did that, like as a joke, and they liked it. They said, keep it. So I'd give the Mars weather and traffic report, down to like a negative 123 degrees with 7.7 hectopascal. And what the rovers were up to. Traffic on the Jezero crater today is kind of stop and go because NASA's Perseverance rover has to stop for the rock samples to pick them up. Meanwhile, on the Utopia Planitia side of Mars, you've got, play 1 is the loneliest number because it's just China's Zhurong rover all by its lonesome self. And then I created segments that really were relevant to what was happening on our Earth here. So sometimes it would be space money talk, just the contracts that NASA has inked with private companies. And then you would appreciate this. It even evolved into space wars, legal matters above the Kármán line, because now we're starting to get into who's signing the Artemis Accord. Is Russia really going to break up with the space station? Just all sorts. Oh, China's building their own now. So just all sorts of legal things we as humans have never had to fathom before. And then I try and pepper it with something fun like Stars Beyond Stars, when Hollywood goes intergalactic. And I'll talk about a new space movie or documentary that's out. Oh, and obviously Rockets Roundup. Rockets Roundup is a roundup of rocket launches around the world, from Kazakhstan, what the Russians are up to what India is launching. We even have t-shirt requests from Mumbai, and let's see what's going on in the Jiquan Center from China. So just different launch pads around the world.
Wow. And that news is much needed, because when did we have a space radio prior to you? This is really cool. And just as a side note, I listened to your Santa Baby and it was so good. You are an amazing singer. I do singing, but once it only took all you had to do was say Santa Baby. And I was like, whoa, I highly recommend listening to that song. And you got to work with some greats, and that led to you going into the space industry. And so what inspired you after that? How did you find your inspiration for space?
Okay, well, my first, wow moment with space was probably when I rode aboard a flight for Air France on the Concorde. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that supersonic jet. It's, not currently in business, but if I may do a share screen, Mark, is that all right? All right, let me show you a picture of what I got to fly on. Here we go, share screen. Okay, this is the British Airways version, although Air France bought some hypersonic jets called the Concorde. Now, why is it special? Because instead of taking 5 or 6 hours to go from New York to Europe, you could do it in 3. Now, how does it do it in 3? Well, you just break this barrier of sound. So you literally, that's why it's so pointy nose. The windows are super tiny. Regular airplanes will fly, let's say 30,000 feet, or about 5.9 to 7 miles. The Concorde flies 11 miles above the Earth. So you're actually, piercing the stratosphere. So this is the Concorde. And should you ever get a blessed moment to travel in a hypersonic jet, here's what it's like. Not your normal takeoff. You are strapped in, and when it starts to take off, it is so bumpy and rocky because you're breaking the sound barrier, the speed of sound. And it has just a red sign at the front of the plane, and it says Mach 1. And you are bumping and you're, trying to break the speed of sound. And then right before you think is this thing gonna fall apart? Can we get any bumpier or louder? It just bing, a bell sounds, and the sign changes to Mach 2. And as soon as you hit Mach 2, it is as silent and serene as this photo. Just, you are floating. And that's when, you can look outside the window, which are very tiny, and see, I don't know if you can notice, just if you can see my mouth here, maybe I can draw a little bit. Just see a slight curvature of the Earth because you're 11 miles above it. And so that was the first time in my life I was like, oh, this is real. That thing you see in the textbooks, that, round meatball, the round globe, it's real. I'm looking at it right now. It's just one of those moments. And even if, you've only seen a major monument, like the Eiffel Tower in Paris, or like your own Capitol building, wherever you live, when you see something from a textbook, it's just amazing to see it in real life. So this is one of those moments where I was like, oh, I've only seen pictures of this in a book, and now it's real. And so I was always fascinated with that. And I just felt like such a speck of, dust or sand compared to the galaxy we live in. And I'll do a little next slide.
Are you sharing other things?
I have one more thing to show. Let me clear this so I can show, just to give people a concept of where it flies. Okay. Grab this over here. All right, so I'm trying to pull, here we go. Okay, the Earth is down here. The troposphere is 0 to 12 kilometers. And then the stratosphere is 12 to 50 kilometers. Look at this man wearing a spacewalking suit. Like, that's how thin it is up there. And you can see the regular airplanes are down here about 30,000 feet. We were at 60,000, so we were just above that line right here. You know what? I'll just put a little check mark. Like this. So we were right here where the green check mark is, to answer your question.
Wow. So that's what inspires you. And what about your obstacles? How did you overcome obstacles to this career, to getting to where you are today?
Okay, I'd say there were three main obstacles. Some of them were physical, and some of them were just trying to figure it out. So physically, before iRoc Space Radio got picked up by iHeartRadio, a major platform that's in 9 out of every 10 US homes and is worldwide, because all you need is a computer to listen. So that's why we get requests from Europe and Mumbai. Before we got picked up by iHeartRadio, I started this in my closet, Rebecca. So I was recording the space news, because if you guys want to go into broadcasting or recording, and the reason I'm in this room and not my main table workroom is because there's a lot of echo out there. So in recording and broadcasting, you don't want echo. You want what we call dry vox. Dry vox are just, the most like dry vocals without lots of echo and reverb. So I was sitting on the floor of my closet with all the dresses and jackets, because that would that would simulate a recording studio, which in a professional recording studio has styrofoam on the walls and like eggshells. So I just sat at the bottom of my closet, and boy, that hurt my back. Oh my gosh, I learned the hard way. And it was really hot in there, because sometimes you put a blanket across to lessen, better acoustics. So physically that was hard. And then we did get picked up by iHeartRadio. So I now go to a professional studio, no more sitting at the bottom of my closet. And then also recently, when I got COVID earlier this year, even though I was vaccinated, it took my voice. And so for a broadcaster, that is like, you right, are really out of luck. And what's interesting is it took about a month to get my regular speaking voice back. People would mistake me for like a man on the phone. Just, I had too much bass. And then in my singing voice, the average student I teach has like 2 octaves, singing octaves. Mariah Carey has like 4 octaves. I have about 3.5. And so I didn't have my regular voice back. And I was very afraid, like, will I ever get all my 3.5 octaves back singing wise? Because I actually did have to sing at a wedding like within a month. So physically, it was very hard to be so patient and just let my voice come back on its own terms. And then the last obstacle I would say is, 2 things. Finding my voice. The success of the news show allowed me to pitch the idea for a second show. So the news was doing great. And we had a team, Zoom call, or no, it was a phone call. And you were pitching new ideas for new shows on the radio. And I pitched this idea of, who in the space world are you? I'm going to interview the best and the brightest in the space world. And people just kind of went like, okay. And it wasn't any resounding like yes or no feedback. So I just thought, okay, well, I'm going to have to believe in myself and just go do it. Like, just go record a pilot episode to show them how great it's going to be. And the first episode was the hardest to record, because I knew a right-hand man to a space billionaire who was the launch code writer. So I was so excited to interview him, but being a right-hand man to a space billionaire, he didn't want to be on my show. He's like, oh no, that's too much, HR red tape. I can't do that. I'm not in a PR position. I was like, no, but you have amazing work, and stories to share. So I thought of a loophole, where there's a will, there's a way. So my obstacle for getting my first guest onto the show was, that's okay. Don't say your full name. That's okay. Don't say your company. And he's like, what? I was like, my first question is always, who in the space world are you? And I said, you just say your first name. That's it. He's like, okay. And when I say, where do you work? Just say, I work for a major space billionaire. And then I'll say, oh, that could be anyone from, and I listed the top 3 space companies and the billionaires that run them. And I just go, we'll let our audience decide. And so it created the loophole for my first guest ever to come on. And let's see. Yeah, and then the last obstacle was when the news show was successful and I got to do this, the top 10 questions with the top guns. The same person that was a record label executive that picked me for this, station said, okay, great show. We need like different voice. And I go, what? And he said, we need a different voice. I go, but you love my voice on the news. He's like, yes, the news is upbeat, fast paced. Welcome to iRoc Space Radio, your go-to place in the galaxy. He said, this is different. This is an interview show. You are sitting down like a documentary. We need a little bit more NPR feel. We need more pensive. And so I was like, oh, and so I literally auditioned new voices for him to pick and be like, that's the one.
And actually, it was your expertise as a singer that allowed you to do that, because it's just like singing a different song. You sing alto, you sing mezzo, you sing soprano, you know the different styles. And so when you said that you got sick and you couldn't reach all of your octaves, for those of you who are listening, that means that she couldn't sing all of her songs because she couldn't hit like the highest notes because her voice was healing. And so that as I've done some performance stuff, it's just beginner stuff, but I have been paid for singing. And I noticed that it helps me with everything that I do, because I can talk and it's just like being on stage. It's the same thing. And it's so interesting how you related your singing to your public speaking, to your broadcasting voice. And so how many voices did you have to give that producer, and what did they decide on?
Third time was the charm. And let me show you the difference right now. If I may do a share screen. Okay, let me do a share screen so you can hear a typical, first, the iHeart radio station DJ announces me, like, who's next on the station. So first you'll hear a man's voice introducing me, and then you'll hear me come on and say my space news intro. After that, I'll do the top 10 questions voice, which is the different voice. Okay, so this is on 7 times a day on iHeartRadio. Let me cue up this video here. Okay.
Highly recommend taking karaoke for any of you who just practice karaoke if you want to get better at speaking in public.
Okay, I'm gonna hit play. Here we go. Hopefully my volume's up loud enough.
iRoc Space Radio News, powered by goingtospace.com.
So that's our announcer.
Your go-to place in the galaxy for the latest in space culture, news, and entertainment.
Welcome to iRoc Space Radio News, your go-to place in the galaxy for the latest in space news, culture, and entertainment. Powered by goingtospace.com. I'm Ashley Furst, giving you a first look at space news. But first, your Mars weather and traffic report. Cue the U2 music because it's a beautiful day with the Jezero crater spring temps at -120 degrees Fahrenheit up to -6 degrees. Air pressure is 7.61 hectopascals and falling. Traffic is all kinds of clear as NASA's rovers Perseverance, Curiosity, and the others are.
All right, so that's how the space news begins. And if I may, we do slower, different music for, like, if I'm, going to interview, well, next month is a billionaire, I can't say his name yet, but when I did interview like Dr. Sian Proctor, NASA's Scott Kelly and stuff, I use, speaking of singing, a different cadence and a different rhythm. So I'll say, and imagine very spa-like music, slow music in the background, when you guys, are going to meditation music, it sounds like this. It's Welcome to Top 10 Questions with the Top Guns in our space industry, where we interview today's movers and shakers. So I hope like you're not listening or driving when you're listening to this, it might make you sleepy, but that's the difference, NPR voice.
Late night DJ voice.
A little bit. Yeah, so that was the difference between those two shows. Uh-oh, you're on mute.
Thank you. I was so excited about this process. So what about for our young people here and that are going to listen to this video in the future and who are really doubting themselves and they're wondering that they're thinking they could never be like you, they could never be good enough to be in the space industry, in the space economy. What advice do you have for those that have that? We were talking about the imposter syndrome where you psychologically, you think you don't belong here. What advice do you have for us?
Well, thank you for that. First of all, I didn't know I was good enough to be like me. Like if you would have told me I was going to be on iHeartRadio one day, I would have been like, wait, what? Like I didn't, major in journalism or whatnot. So my advice is for the next generation, don't be afraid to be the first one. And don't be afraid to be the first of your kind. And what I mean by that is it's been a theme throughout my life, Rebecca, and everyone listening around the world. I have been used to being the underdog, really. I was a public school kid in California who kept my grades up, and through sports, that started to open doors to be recruited by other colleges. I applied to Harvard. I actually got in. No one in my family had gone Ivy League or East Coast, or going to college wasn't a guarantee even. And so I was the first to do that. And even like in sports, one of my passions is playing basketball. Well, you can imagine when you've lived in New York City and you roll up to play basketball in Harlem, not a lot of this on the basketball court. And so people will see me and I'll get the like, hey, sweetie, hey, honey, who are you here to cheer for? And then someone else will like look down, see my sneakers and be like, oh, she's wearing LeBron's, or oh, those are Kyrie's. Like those aren't sit and cheer shoes. She's here to play shoes. And so it's okay to be the first one. And especially like with this broadcasting, because I was, the first one and space news is so new, I decided the format, like, you know what, we should start with weather and traffic, just like Earthlings do, but it'll be Mars weather and traffic. And, let's see what the other rockets are up to. So don't be afraid to be the first one, and don't be afraid to be the first of your kind. And I've just seen that like in business, in sports throughout my life, being the first one, being the first of your kind. It's okay. Like that's what being a trailblazer is. Go for it.
And what better community to do it in than space, because we will be the first ones. We're setting it all up. And so I want to touch on this idea that a lot of people, maybe students, think that they can't do something because they tried and it didn't work. So let's talk about preparation. How do you prepare for an interview? Show us the behind the scenes and like how hard, like for one presentation, how many hours go into that? What's the prep work like?
Oh my goodness, it is a labor of love. So for instance, this space news that I do, and I will get to the interview show, but first off, the space news is a 4-minute show. I start Friday, Saturday, looking at the space headlines, because if I'm going to record on Sunday, I want the headlines to be fresh for Monday morning. So Friday, Saturday, I start culling the space headlines. It used to take me a couple hours to write the script, but not anymore, because I realized I don't need to read the whole article. Let's read the title, the first paragraph, and maybe a little bit more than that. So I can whip out a script in like 90 minutes, but then I need to go back and edit it. So it's, still under 4 minutes. So tip to tail, and then it takes like an hour to record. I'm not reading the whole time. It's post-production, you actually cut out the breaths. You don't hear me go, and now because that's time, and time is money. So in the space news, you won't hear me say a big breath or, cough. So that takes several hours. And then to this week's, if anyone listens to this week's, I believe we're on Pacific time, 3 a.m., 6 a.m., 9 a.m., 12 p.m., 3 p.m., 6 p.m., and 9 p.m., the space news on iHeartRadio, on iRoc Space Radio. There's a Nicki Minaj and a Lil Wayne song. But people don't know that when I splice in music, Rebecca, it's not just, oh, stop talking, hit play on the song. I've done this with Queen. I've done it with David Bowie. I've done it with, Foghorn. I actually am splicing the song without the listener knowing it, because I'm taking the most famous chorus or the most famous intro and putting them together, but I don't want you to hear the splices. And then I'm lowering the volume in case I have to keep talking. And then I bring it back up when, they're, for instance, this week's song by Nicki Minaj says, I'll be waiting for you on the dark side of the moon. And I said, speaking of the dark side of the moon, that's exactly where NASA has decided to land for the Artemis, program next time. And so, yeah, this week's took like 8 hours for 4 minutes. Normally it takes, I'd say 4 hours for 4 minutes on the space news. Now for the interview show, I kind of Google stalk the person. I do a deep dive, no shame, just Google stalk, if you're my next guest, or, maybe one of the students listening right now today will be my next guest someday. I'm sure someone listening will go into space and will, need to be interviewed on my Top Gun space show someday. I will do a Google stalking, deep dive on you to find out how you got into this business, where you want to go with it, what your new project is. And then I look at the videotapes of interviews you've done, because I don't want to ask a question you've already been asked. So I actually will edit my questions and not ask, what would you tell the next generation, if I see you've answered that question a whole lot. And so let's see what else. And then I like to ask something that, oh, I should have said this is one of my obstacles. I won't say who, but let's just say I was very excited to interview this Top Gun in space. And I don't know if it was like too early in the morning for them, or maybe I was their 100th interview, so they're tired of interviews. But when I said, who in the space world are you? They gave me the most like, hello, my name is Joe Johnson. And I was like, well, please don't sound so excited to be here. And I was like, this is not going to be a good interview. So I was like, I'm sorry, let me just adjust some microphone levels before we really begin. Let's start with a warm-up question. Hey, is it true? I heard a rumor that you once pulled a prank that. And so they started to tell the story about an amazing prank they pulled up in outer space. And by the time they finished answering that warm-up question, I go, okay, we're ready to go with the microphone levels. Who in the space world are you? And they go, I'm Joe Johnson, captain of da, 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 da. And I was like, yes, whew, okay. So you have to producer while you're interviewing.
It sounds like you have to wear multiple hats to make things happen. And I just wanted to say this again. You said that it takes you 1 hour of work to get 1 minute that you're going to post online, that you're going to make public. So there's a lot of work that goes into the behind the scenes. And that's why people might not be successful, because they didn't put in that 1 hour per minute. But maybe if we put in that 1 hour per minute, then we get there. Okay, I have one more question for you, and then we're gonna open up the discussion to everyone. So everyone, please be ready with your questions for Ashley. What do you hope, Ashley, what do you hope our multi-planet future looks like in 100 years?
Wow, this seems like a crazy question at first. Yeah, like but when I thought about it, I don't know if everyone on the phone is old enough, or Zoom is old enough to know movies like Back to the Future, or like, Jetsons cartoons, like, these science fiction movies we used to have are starting to come true. Like in Back to the Future, they had this crazy thing called a video phone, and someone's picture would appear live. And oh my gosh, everyone has that today. Like everyone has FaceTime, everyone has, WhatsApp and stuff. So what do I hope our multi-planet future looks like? I hope, and I can't wait for it to be an environment of inclusivity. Like the fact that, thank you, Mark, for founding the Space Prize, that one day it won't be an anomaly for there to be so many women in space. And if I could do a share screen real quick, just to show, let's look at the Apollo class of astronauts. Okay, these, we'll just say, young men right here, mostly Caucasian. And now let's look at the Artemis class of astronauts. Okay. I see a lot more variation in melatonin and gender and diversity. And so I hope our multiplanetary existence is more inclusive, but also just not a novelty. Like the fact that we're talking about it right now is amazing. That means it's going to happen in the generation of one of the students listening here today. It's going to happen in their generation or their children's generation. So the fact that we're talking about it means it's that much closer. And Mark, thank you for holding this forum, because I've always said, and here, as you look at the next class of Artemis astronauts, I've always said the greatest missiles that any nation can launch are the minds of the next generation. So thank you for everyone for tuning in today, just to be a part of this evolution.
Oh, that's very inspiring. Thank you so much, Ashley. Ashley Furst, for being here. So now let's hear from our students and our visitors here. Who wants to ask Ashley a question? Please put it in the chat or raise your hand and we'll call on you. By the way, I Google stalked you before this interview and I found out that you speak 4 languages. Is it true?
Sing. That was see, sing, and da.
Wow.
So yeah, if anyone prefers their question in Spanish, Portuguese, or Italian, a little bit of Russian, let me know.
It's beautiful. I have another question if nobody's ready yet. Mark, how's it looking?
I got a couple DMs going here, but I don't think I've seen a question in the chat just yet. Oh, we got a new one.
Okay.
Something from Matasha,
Hey, Motasha.
who is not on camera today, but he's saying you're so enthusiastic and your energy is really inspiring. Matasha being a student in Pakistan, by the way, and he's asking, what is your educational background and what did you learn in high school and college, presumably that led you here?
Okay. This is where the don't be afraid to be the first of your kind lesson comes in, because so my high school was a public school here, blue ribbon, district. We always won the academic decathlons, really great high school called Laguna Hills High School. From there, I went to Harvard, and I actually majored in sociology because I was fascinated by psychology and man's interaction with each other. And so that's not your traditional computer science or astronomy background. However, something I always did, since I was inspired by the Concorde and just throughout my life, is when I would see Scientific American, I would pick up that magazine. So like some people would go to like, Vogue or, Motor magazine or just different magazines. And I would always pick out Scientific American. So I just loved reading articles on black holes, the universe, even like, neurology articles. So I fed my science fascination with magazine articles. And then because, I've always been amazed by what's up there and what's out there. And I love broadcasting and being able to disseminate information in a relatable way. So yes, I'm talking about the nitrous tetroxide or, the O-rings on the hydrazine on a rocket, but I want to make it relatable to the listeners and make it more just entertaining and more available to everyone.
Oh yeah, again, thank you very much from Matasha.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I'll throw a question out there too, because this question often goes the other way with educators. But as I'm thinking about your experience in broadcasting, particularly being somebody who didn't come out of journalism, what sort of advice might you have for kids who care about space and might be interested in being a YouTuber?
Okay.
Which, by the way, might also be my kids. And then Donna, I see your hand up too. But fire away, Ashley.
That's great. You know what? If you have a fascination with something or a passion with something, definitely go for that, because that in and of itself is going to be contagious in your energy and your love for it. And so people want to turn to you to be like, oh, well, so-and-so loves that so much. Let's ask them. They're such an aficionado on it. And so just having that love for it will open doors. But also, in the YouTube medium, what's the greater message you want to get across? Something I'm very cognizant when I report in broadcasting is the narrative and the neutral tone. So I will say a news headline, and then instead of saying like, gee, did Russia make this big stink in order to distract us from what they really just did when they had this press release? I won't say any of that. I will not say my personal opinion, even though I know PR and crisis management tactics. So here's what I like to do. And as a YouTuber, you can do this too. You find what you're passionate about. You broadcast, the most important, relevant news, current event of the moment. And then what I try to do is I ask a question that poses it to every listener. And so it's not telling them what to think about this. I'm literally dropping a question like a pebble in a pond to create the rings and the ripples for people to start discussing amongst themselves and discuss with each other. So when you have a message as a YouTuber or anything really, what is the greater question that you want people to start discussing and really have a healthy discussion? It's okay to not agree. It's okay to, drop questions that people have different feelings about.
Thank you. Donna, what's your question? Go ahead.
Okay, I had to switch computers. Are you able to hear me on this one? Okay. You mentioned entertainment, Ashley, and I was thinking about like creative, original, like sci-fi segments. And since I missed a few minutes, how long did you say your segments were in the time periods?
Oh, you know what? I actually don't confine each segment to a time, Donna. I make sure the overall newsreel is about 4 minutes. And so each week, sometimes I don't always have a Stars Beyond Stars when Hollywood goes intergalactic segment. I know we did a big one when Nichelle Nichols passed away. She was one of the founding cast members of Star Trek. She was the first interracial kiss on TV. And she actually had a huge role, like Hidden Figures sort of role, where off camera, when she wasn't a Star Trek, TV cast member, she helped NASA recruit more diverse recruits. And so there was a documentary that came out on her life called Woman in Motion. I highly recommend. So to answer your question, I don't always time each segment. It's more of like what is happening in the world this week. And I remember when she passed away, we had a large segment on Stars Beyond Stars, when Hollywood goes intergalactic. And then I would say something about her recent passing, the documentary that features her, or just anytime there is a new science fiction movie coming out, whether it was, Matt Damon's The Martian or whatever's on the horizon.
I was thinking like in terms of parts of science fiction stories that we may write, and I guess going back to the old days where you'd have a chapter and then later on you'd have another chapter enticing people to come back, and that type of.
That's an excellent idea.
Short,
like, hey, instead of TV or movies, here's a new book on the horizon, and here's an excerpt from that book. And then I see what you mean. That would get people hooked on like, oh, there's a new science fiction book.
Be book or some essays, maybe sci-fi short segments people are writing.
That's an excellent idea.
Future, it's kind of like a.
You know what? It could be a tag along. So it's not necessarily like inside the newsreel, but once it ends, that could be the next little program that comes on instead of a song.
Interesting.
Tell people like, hey, there's a new sci-fi book on the horizon, and this would be a chance for that person to, pay for their commercial part of just like, here's an excerpt from my chapter, and here's how you find it or buy it. That's a great idea.
It might be interesting. As far as you mentioned entertainment, and I don't know how people would be enticed to listen to.
The author could pay for like a short segment to read his book online or read his book out loud on her stage. And then you never know, once the sales of that book goes up, maybe someone wants to turn it into a screenplay and turn it into a movie. You never know.
There you go.
You never know who's watching you, so always do your best.
Thanks.
Thank you, Donna.
We have a question from Matasham. He asked what kind of rules and like privacy laws or what do you have to be careful of like legally when you're doing broadcasting?
This goes back to the tone and the narrative that I'm very cognizant of. And I think it helps, going to a liberal arts school and just being surrounded by people of different backgrounds and everything, because In terms of, privacy and legality, I actually do turn to our record label executive who, has now started his own company. And I ask him, like, is it okay for me to say, when I talk about a new sci-fi TV show or movie, like it's featured on this station or on this channel? And he's like, not unless that channel's paying us to say on blank blank. And I was like, oh, okay, got it. And then in terms of, other legality things, sometimes you have to drop in the word allegedly. And sometimes I drop in the word reportedly. So I drop in little words that say like alert, alert, this has not been 1000% confirmed. Or I'll say like word on the street is, because that's code for, in any broadcasting, I have an inside source and I'm not allowed to reveal it. So when you hear me say reportedly or word on the street, that means I can't reveal my sources. So yeah, great question on watch out for legality and, privacy when you're broadcasting.
So it's almost like you should never say like, this is for sure the truth until you're for sure that it's confirmed. And you hear that a lot in the news. Go ahead.
And here's what I do. Every time I send in the newsreel to our engineer team to upload it to the radio station who uploads it to iHeart, I say script below. And every week I turn in a script that is at least 3 pages. And at the bottom of my script, I say article cited. And I have every single news article that I cited that backs up what I said.
And you probably learned that at Harvard, right? Where you learned that you weren't allowed to.
Annotated bibliography, yes.
For those of you who don't know, at Harvard University and at any university, you get kicked out if you lie. And so you can't say something is true unless you have your sources. You have to back it up with reports. So I have another question for you, unless Mark, do you have someone waiting?
No, you got to that one. So I think we're good. Yeah, fire away with your question and then we'll wrap up.
Okay. Ashley, last question. How do you think we can prepare students for success in the growing space industry?
Oh, I'd have to say prevalence and inclusivity. And prevalence means like the commonality of something. So I don't know if you've ever seen those Instagrams or TikToks where someone will take a t-shirt from the little boys section and they'll put it in the little girls section just because the t-shirt said tough as nails or, strong as the stars. And so just that idea of like, they have STEM programs today, obviously. When I was a kid, they did. So just that idea of just toys that emphasize building. And actually that's a strong piece of advice I get from all the top guns in the space industry I interview. I say, what advice would you give the next generation? A lot of them say, put down the screen and get out onto the scene, start building something. So like literally with your hands, start building, see what flies, see what fails. So yeah, the prevalence of, and even like, I didn't have Barbie dolls growing up. My sister did. She was older. I wasn't allowed to touch them because, little siblings tend to mess things up. But I did have an erector set I got for Christmas one year. And that was awesome to be able to build, these little steel contraptions with wheels on them and a battery. And to this day, I save $100 on Amazon not assembling my furniture because I've been a building like since I was a kid. So I would say the prevalence of more activities and toys that are about building, actual structures and inclusivity, and just that we're all doing it together. I love the fact that sometimes I would do stuff around the house with my mom, like just, whatever parent was available would help, but just, it wasn't such a set, fixed, stay in your lane role type situation.
Wow. So everyone, you heard it. Ashley wants you to put down your computer, your laptop, your tablet, your phone, get outside, call your friends and build rockets. And let's learn to build stuff. And Ashley, thank you so much for being here today. You are an inspiration and you're so enthusiastic and super talented. It's just an honor to get to know you. And I feel like I've made a friend, so please keep in touch. And I will send it over to Mark now to close us out.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Rebecca.
So real quick, can I just say thank you, Mark. Thank you, Rebecca. And to everyone listening, if you have any tips or ideas, tell us at iRoc Space Radio. If you go on the website, iRocspaceradio.com, and you click on my top 10 questions. So it says to nominate or, for ideas, contact us and we will take, any of your ideas you have, just let us know what should be on the radio, space radio.
I love it. And I'm so glad we had you on here, because that is also such a great place for kids to get a short, entertaining taste of the space news every week. So very, very cool. And if they want more interviews like this, of course, they can listen to the Top 10 show too, which is really fantastic and accessible. So thank you so much for making the time to come in and join us here. It's great to have a professional like yourself on this show. And thank you to Rebecca for stepping up. She's been with us as a participant for so many episodes. It's so fun to have her as our guest host this time around. Really fantastic. And Rebecca, you know what I thought we might do with a couple of the last minutes we have is we had a really special overview roundtable this morning talking about SpaceKind training led by Loretta Whitesides. And it's just something I can highly recommend to any of the educators here, perhaps to some of the students. So I can't speak to whether or not they'll accept students under 18, but it's a really fantastic approach to the new right stuff, as opposed to kind of the old tough test pilot right stuff. This is authentic relating, working together as a team, collaboratively building humanity's future. And this 8-week training helps you get crystal clear on your mission and your role in it and your own hero's journey. So Rebecca, I don't know if you want to add anything to that. I know you've been working with SpaceKind too.
Thank you, Mark. So Mark and I are fellow SpaceKinders, and you may have seen the t-shirts out and about, but SpaceKind is, it's an 8-week training, and it just rises you, it helps you rise to your higher humanity, and it's all space oriented. So Ashley, you should join us. The next session starts in September 27th. Mark, do you have the link on hand? It's spacekind.org.
That's it, spacekind.org, yeah.
Spacekind.org, and you can still register. If you're a student, there's a rising income option, and then also once you finish the course, you get half your money back too. And so Donna, I think we've talked about it before in the other group that we're in together. And so all of you, if you're interested in just really connecting with other members of the space community on a vulnerable level, you'll definitely be talking about your struggles. You'll be talking about authenticity and honesty, and basically what it takes to get to space, as far as like not just knowing how to build a spaceship, but how to live in a spaceship, or how to bring our humanity to other galaxies or to other places, so that we're proud to send Earthlings to other starry worlds, instead of sending maybe the bottom of humanity where we're fighting and arguing and killing each other. That's not what we want to send to space. So spacekind.org, please join us. I will be there. And Ashley, I would love to see you there. That would be great. And any of you who are interested.
Yeah, or listening in the next month or so. That the new cohort is September 27th. And if you're watching this way later, there's always new cohorts about every quarter, but visit spacekind.org and you can learn more about it.
Yeah, and
Awesome.
Matasham, I don't know the answer to your question, but if you go on there, there's an email there. And if you can't find the email, just have message Mark, he'll get that answer for you.
Well, at this point, I feel like I should reach out to Loretta and see how we can get SpaceKind into schools. I think that's a next step there.
Oh, yes, start, like Ashley said, training the next generation, teach them like internal infrastructure and external infrastructure.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Rebecca. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you to everybody who participated and asked questions, and to those of you particularly that join us week after week here. It's really fantastic to have your participation here. You can learn more about Space Prize Foundation at spaceprize.org, and more about SpaceKind at spacekind.org. And hope to see some of you in a week's time. So take care in the meantime. Again, I'm always happy to stick around for a couple of minutes if anybody likes, but I will stop the recording here.